I think a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to pull it off is actually super healthy because it makes you work harder. And there's one thing that, you can't teach people, and what you can't teach is hunger.
Hey, Jeetu. I'm excited to welcome you on to our Thoughtcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Howie. I love the name, by the way, Thoughtcast. Love that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we got to lead with thoughts. Well, I'm really, really excited to chat with you. I think, first of all, you're an extraordinary product leader. You've worked at Box, you're now at Cisco. You've done some really, really great work as one of the major unit leaders at Cisco, but now have become the CPO of the whole company. I think there's a really interesting story to be told around the philosophy that you're bringing to that role. But first, I thought we could start with just a quick background. Maybe tell us the story of your career. How did you get started in this product leadership world? And, how did you learn and grow throughout that journey to get you here?
I actually went the reverse way, Howie, than what most people do. I started by doing my own startup. So coming out of college, I was interning at a company that eventually we did a leverage buyout. I was making minimum wage. I was able to borrow $250,000 from someone, bought the company, ran it for 17 years. It's still running. It's actually a successful consultancy in Chicago. Uh,
Durable business.
it's a durable business, but it wasn't super high scale, which is what I was missing. So I wanted to move to the Valley. I used to, the software companies were customers of mine. So I moved to the Valley, became CTO at EMC. From there, I became CEO of a small business unit that they'd acquired of a company that competed with Box. We scaled that business 0 to 100 in about, close to 18 months. And then at that point in time, Dell was buying EMC. We were going to carve out that business. Actually, no, we scaled it in 2.5 years, not 18 months. I lied. And then,
Still fast.
still fast. Aaron was had just gone public. We were having dinner one night. Aaron Levy is the CEO at Box. And I didn't know him that well. We were acquaintances. We were having dinner. And he said, why don't you come join us here? We need someone who's been a CEO before that can get us from a single product company to a multi-product company. So I did that. He is now one of my best friends. We were lucky enough to scale the business together from 200 to about 800 million. And then I was going to join a FANG company to run like advertising for them. And then Chuck Robbins called me last minute, who's the CEO at Cisco, and said, why don't you come join here and you can run the security business and you can run the video and WebEx business. And I did that, and it's probably been one of the best career moves I've made. And it's been a fantastic journey. 4.5 years later, I feel completely energized, and I feel like we're going to do some amazing things together.
That's awesome. I feel like your humility is seeping through in that, there's a major leap at the very beginning of your story from, going and founding a company to then becoming CTO of EMC. And maybe what was it about your skill set or approach that allowed you to scale your career so quickly? And I'm sure a lot of the people listening here are interested in taking, kind of wisdom from you and applying it to their own career arcs.
I actually feel like we get too caught up in our experience, and sometimes experience can be a great impediment to success because you get held back by it. And so the way I think about this is I try to do things I've never done before, uh, and I try not to do the same thing twice because it just becomes it creates a very limiting mindset because you get this false sense of like, well, I've done this before, so I know it. And I think a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to pull it off is actually super healthy because it makes you work harder. And there's one thing that you can't teach people, and what you can't teach is hunger. And if you can construct a state of constantly being hungry because you're trying to be intellectually stimulated enough to do something that you've never done before, that's a natural kind of way to generate hunger within it's the hunger generating innovation engine, which is like I have a healthy enough ego to not want to fail at something miserably, and so I'm going to work really hard to try to make sure that I do well at it. And if I've done it once and I try to do it a second time, it feels like, oh, I'm going to marginalize the learning because I feel I'll be too confident and too cocky. And so try to keep going there, being humble enough to say, I don't know this and I'm going to learn everything about it. I'm going to ask stupid questions. And that allows you to get into a state of being creative rather than just being in a state of doling out advice all the time.
In a way, it reminds me of my own experience founding a company. Airtable started as two, then three people, and then five and 10. And at every phase, you're having to learn the job again, right? Especially in the role of CEO. I mean, CEO of a two-person company is very different from CEO of a 20 or a 200-person company. And, the complexity of the business changes. And so, this comfort with discomfort seems to be a really important theme. And what I observe is there's too many people who try to give advice that is very static, right? Here's a playbook. Here's how you do
There
product
is no,
management.
yeah.
Well, and by definition, I think it's very maybe telling that your first experience was finding product market fit with a business, right? Now, maybe it was different, very different from the kinds of businesses you've now worked on and scaled. But I think the very act of product market fit finding cannot be so formulaic that it becomes just a series of checkboxes, right? Or else anyone could do it. It would be too easy.
And
So
you
maybe
have to shock the system a little bit. Like one of the things in my first job to the second job was my first job at maximum, at peak capacity, we had gotten to 60 people, 60. Then I went from 60 to 60,000 people. Um, and it just shocks your system. And in a way, and it was a services business, and I went to a software business and hardware business. And then from there, I went to a 2,000 person company that had just gone public, but was not really quite fully. And when I joined them, it was like 1,200 people or something. And then we went to 90,000 people at Cisco with 5 businesses. So I think if you keep shocking yourself, it's very healthy for the system.
it's like a metaphorical cold plunge every step of your.
It's like a lunch. Exactly.
So let's talk about specifics. You know, Speak a little bit about first of all what the role entailed at both Box and then Cisco when you first joined, and then now Cisco, and how you've had to kind of adjust your approach in each case. I think that the adjustment is actually really interesting, as much so as the actual playbook in each phase.
So at Box, what was interesting was, you're in a founder-led company, and I had to figure out a way that Aaron, I could get the most out of Aaron without Aaron becoming something that I was just taking orders from, because it would not be fulfilling if all I was doing was kind of taking a founder's vision and executing it. I wanted to make sure that I had a creative element to it, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't lose what Aaron had. But the thing that was really interesting at Box was they were a single product company trying to go multi-product. And you had to make sure that you changed everything from not just the product that you build, but the go-to-market engine that they had and everything that needed to be done so that you could construct a multi-product engine from a single product, very successful company. Um, and so that was the big kind of shift that needed to happen internally, where people had to sell, and we built like 5 or 7 different products within that became the extension. The product that I started with at Box was Platform, which we had a separate area, and it is now a thriving business. And I have dinner with Aaron every like 6 weeks or so, and it's really exciting to see how well Platform is doing, which is what we had started with. And then eventually I'd taken over all the product. It was very different from the experience I had at Cisco, where when I came in, I joined during COVID. And so I didn't meet anyone in a 90,000 person company for the first
Yeah,
9 months,
yeah.
except the
Little screens on a display.
exactly. Zoom had achieved verb status, and WebEx was kind of floundering because we didn't really quite have stability in the product. We hadn't innovated well in the product, but the team was really hungry. And within a very compressed amount of time, they were able to actually turn around WebEx. We added like 1,800 features. I think our NPS score at the time was 22. We're now at 68. And they did a fantastic job in just getting hardware, software fully integrated. And it required a level of injection of velocity that was not as hard to do when there was clarity on purpose and vision for the business. So the only thing I contributed at WebEx was clarity and purpose, articulation, and then attention to detail. Like I would do design reviews with the team weekly. And the reason for that was not because I could add so much knowledge that they wouldn't have, but I wanted them to know that the person at the very top cared about how pixel placement happened on a screen and how an experience for the user manifested. And so you had to make sure that that was practiced so that you could have a culture where people could critique each other and it was okay, and you could make mistakes and that was okay. But we were all going to not worry about each other's feelings. We were going to worry about building the best damn product there is, and that was the mission. And if that offended you, then you were probably self-selecting yourself out. And that was great because we needed people that actually didn't care about that dimension and only cared about the dimension that said, can I build the best product in the market? That was very different, by the way, from the second business I was running, which was security, where I never quite got the same level of cooperation from the leadership team that was there when I inherited it compared to the one that I had at WebEx. So I had to change out a lot of the leadership team in security. And that was very different from the first one. So you just have to kind of adjust to it. And if I had just taken the WebEx playbook, even applied it in the same company to a different business unit, that wouldn't have worked. So you have to kind of look at every single instance individually, learn from the patterns you've actually been able to experience in the past, but don't get so dependent on the patterns that that's just the way that it works and doesn't work any other way. Because every business is different, and your playbook is never portable, but your playbook acts as an instruction um, outlet for you, but which it gives you some instructions for that you can intake and then say, this is what I want to do with it.
For sure. I do want to pause and highlight something I think very profound you said, which was, the only thing I did when I took over WebEx was create a lot of clarity of vision and also apply a much higher bar of attention to detail, right? And I think it sounds very, very simple. And, again, and maybe the spirit of humility, you're making it sound very, very straightforward. But I think these two things I've seen at many other companies, one example being Apple, one being Airbnb with Brian Chesky's founder mode philosophy that now has been widely discussed. I think those two things are the big thing, right? When you have clarity of vision, which I think actually becomes very, very hard at scale. I found
Very hard.
as scaled, when you found when you found a company, and it's very small and you're just getting off the ground, you have to have some clarity of purpose and vision, or else you just wouldn't build anything that breaks through and becomes a product market fitting product. But as you scale up, there's just so many different either organizational dimensions and different people, different groups with kind of their own ideas, sometimes good ideas about what this company or product can become, and the natural entropy of a larger and larger group and a potentially more sprawling roadmap or set of products or even businesses, I think tends towards the opposite of that clarity of vision. So,
There's a
a lot
really
of
interesting point there that's probably worth reflecting on, which is if every company that is successful today that is a large company used to be a startup.
Mhm.
Every single one of them. There's no exception, right?
They have to come.
They all started from somewhere and then they grew and they actually had success, but that success can sometimes get you complacent. And what happens when your companies get large is they lose that ability to really get um, the founder mentality is lost because what you don't have is you're not close enough to the front lines at that point. And
Mm,
so what ends up happening is rather than you directly going to your customer and saying, what do you want that I'm going to build for you? Now there's 7 layers in the middle and it's
mm,
like playing telephone game. And
yeah,
what you get is really good at the math of the business, but you lose the soul of the business, which is the product mapping to customer requirements. And I think what you have to do in a large company is keep fighting on behalf of the customers so that you can become you don't kind of forget the soul of the business, which is the moment you have mediocrity in your product, it is the beginning of the end, right? And so you have to continue to keep building great products that people love, that they talk to their friends and family about, because there is no other effective scalable engine to get your product to hundreds of millions or billions of people other than word of mouth. Like it just does not exist, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we've all seen companies that became, kind of that go-to-market driven behemoth without great products, and I think it's historically always been unsustainable to continue driving growth, right? Just, I think there's a certain, ground truth to customers in the long term are smart, and they're going to go towards the products and the companies that serve them the best. I think there's something really powerful too about the idea of not allowing yourself as a product leader to get disintermediated from that ground truth of how's this product actually showing up for customers? How is it achieving the job, right? You may have like a beautiful deck, that has all of the different metric updates and all of these roadmap updates that's been rolled up through 7+ layers of an organization, but that doesn't always correlate to what is the product experience that customers are actually getting. And I'm curious, do you have any techniques that allow you to get back to that ground truth and really seeing front lines, like how are customers experiencing our products?
Yeah, so one of the things that I try to do is that as companies get large, we start to create our own versions of the truth rather than actually seeking the truth. And I think the truth comes from not asking leading questions, but asking questions where, firstly, the mental model you have to be in is not try to seek the answer you're looking for, but try to seek for the truth in the answer and saying, how does the customer actually feel, rather than trying to figure out whether or not the customer likes your product because you secretly hope they do.
All right, you want to present a green OKR on your
Exactly.
right, your QBRs.
Those green dashboard items actually get me really concerned sometimes, because it's like people just want to give you good news. And I'm like, the ultimate, like the way I think about this is core values are pretty important. One of the core values I have, like I said, is like build products that people love, that they talk to their friends and family about. But that requires a product leader to be in a very distinct mindset, which is not just build the product, but get the product to significant levels of adoption. And once you've gotten to adoption, you have to make sure that you get the product to commercial relevance. If you don't get it to commercial relevance, it's just a science project. It's not really a product that you built. It's not a company you built based on the product. So I think you have to seek an appetite from customers to be able to want to spend money with you. And that's why I believe, like, don't build vitamins, build painkillers. Because people will say it's nice to have a vitamin, but I'm not going to pay for it. But it's very hard for a customer to ignore painkillers. So the first thing I think about, there's like three core principles we keep in mind. First one is build products that people love, that get to commercial relevance, that they talk to everyone about. So there's a virality effect. The second area is you got to think ecosystem first. You got to get the entire ecosystem talking about your product rather than just you talking about your product. Because when other people experience success from integrating with you, they will talk about your product, and that's what creates a movement, right? And then the third thing you have to keep in mind is you can't be linear in your progression of the product. You have to be asymmetric, which means that you can't be 10% better than someone else. You have to be 10x better than someone else. And in order to be 10x better, you have to deeply think about what are the things you're not going to do that you can do and rely on the ecosystem with, so that the things that you do, you can actually do in a way that's a step function improvement, where it's irresponsible for the customer to not pay attention to you. It's not something that, like, if a customer thinks about you and says, yeah, I could take it or leave it, that is not a great product. But if a customer says, I could get fired because someone would say to me, why didn't you even look at this? Or I would look stupid if I didn't look at it. That is the state that you want the customer to be in, that it is irresponsible for them to ignore you. And that requires intrinsic value created in the product that's so differentiated that it's hard to just go out and replicate by someone else by throwing 1,000 engineers at the problem.
It's also more motivating, I think, internally to work on better products, right? I mean, you feel like you're doing something that's actually purposeful and breakthrough in the world.
That's
I
it.
think each principles is worth briefly highlighting. first of all, because there's so much relevance to any other company at any phase, like a startup finding product market fit. I think you could apply each of these three principles. One, you can't just build a product; you have to build a product that people love. But not only that, you have to get scale, right? And then commercial relevance. You have to follow that initial product market fit all the way through to what I would call product market scale, right? And so completing the swing to that commercial relevance piece. On the second one, you don't exist in a vacuum. No product is the only product that your customer uses, right? I mean, we all live in an ecosystem of many different products, vendors, even just purely in software, or you could pick any one category, even in networking. You probably have multiple vendors that you're working with for different use cases, parts of your business. And so recognizing that truth and playing well into the ecosystem instead of kind of ignoring it and pretending like you're the only game in town. And then third, non-incremental, the 10x unlocks, like how do you swing bigger? I think that's a really powerful philosophy that I think all of the best breakthrough product companies of the past generation, whether it's, Airbnb, whether it's Apple. I was studying up about the history of AMD under Lisa Su, and like, she has this philosophy as well of like, think even more ambitiously, right? Set
I
10x
had
more ambitious.
breakfast with her just this morning.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, well, very timely. But I think these are all companies that have had enormous breakout success, right? I mean, literally to the tune of creating from scratch hundreds of billions of dollars of market capitalization value. And that's not normal, right? I mean, you've got to do something differently. And so, when you take these three principles and now think about how you're applying them on an even bigger scale, which is all of Cisco. And I think for those listening, I mean, it's worth noting just how much surface area Cisco and your remit entails, right? I mean, both in terms of the just span of people, many tens of thousands of people now in your org. But second of all, the complexity of the products, the necessary complexity from the hardware engineering layer all the way up to the software layer. And of course, you're doing a lot of stuff with AI and security. So just the actual technical nuances of this product are far greater than, let's say a platform like X, right? Where, very, very great platform, et cetera. But the complexity thereof is much smaller than I think the stack that you're working with. And so, as you jumped into this, bigger remit, how do you think about applying the principles in this setting?
I think there's a different, firstly, there's a few skills that you have to actually learn at scale, and different stages of companies will have product leaders that need to hone different skills. So, for example, if you're a product leader that's in a single product company, all that matters is get product market fit in that company, but also build the route to market for that is optimized for the product that you have. And the disruption might come not just from the product that you build, but also from the economics as well as the route to market that you actually follow. And so that's pretty important for a single product company. Now you go to a multi-product company. What do you need to do that's different? You shouldn't build a multi-product company where every product has a different route to market. You want to make sure that you're leveraging the route to market you already have and the distribution that you already have, but you need to ensure that you can get more of the wallet share within the same customer in the route to market you might have. And you might have different insertion points. If your primary product is one insertion point, you might create another insertion point, but with that same route to market. Now you go to a company like Cisco, there's a few other skills that are important, which is you need to have portfolio management as a skill, where I'm going to have some products that are declining, some products that are growing, and I need to make sure that the balance is enough so that the composite revenue is actually growing. That'll be a pretty important skill to have. You need to make sure that your 0 to 1 products that you build have a very well defined ideal customer profile for your distribution channel. Because if you don't have that ideal customer profile well defined, your product will fail by definition, because your large sales force, in enterprise at least, will try to go out and sell your product that you built from 0 to 1 to every customer, every geo, every market, every segment all at once. And it's like, I don't need to be dominant in China for my version 1 of the product or for the first billion. Like, so no, I'm not going to focus on those markets. So like, you have to be very, very focused on where are you going to have your ideal customer profile, which gives you the largest amount of chance to win. Focus on that, and then expand your customer profile over time to incorporate different markets. But if you try to bite off the entire elephant in one bite, it doesn't work. You have to make sure that you go after a large market, but attack it bit by bit. And I think those dimensions are pretty important. So I feel like there's three phases that a product leader should keep in mind. First one is, and you have to know where you are in this phase. First one is you have to get to product market fit, which basically in my mind is really understanding if retention happens and do you understand why retention occurs, right? The retention curve should not asymptote at zero, and you have to make sure that the asymptote is happening at a much higher level on day 7, day 21, day 30, day 50, or 60. Number two, once you've got to product market fit, which by the way, most people think they get product market fit when they really haven't. The one of the easiest ways to tell is, do you have retention? Second one then is, do you have go to market fit? Which means, is there a repeatable opportunity creation motion with the same titles over and over again, that you're able to sell and create opportunities which that can be prosecuted effectively? And then third, only after you've reached one and two and checked them off do you go to scale. If you prematurely get to scale, you're just wasting a lot of time because it's garbage in, garbage out, and you're creating a leaky bucket. And so that's what you need to have as a core phase. And then you have to say, okay, now which products are in which phase? And you got to make sure that if a product is in scale phase, then you need to go out and start to ensure that in addition to innovation, you're also optimizing those products so that you're driving them with a level of efficiency. But don't do so much efficiency work that you forget to innovate in that product, because that's how products die. And so
If
those combination of kind of I think that combination of how you go through the phases and how you optimize in each phase is super important for any product leader to really understand and get an owner mentality for your business, rather than getting I'm just over here to go out and do my piece of the functional work. As a product leader, you have to understand and own and influence the entire life cycle, from the time you build the product to the time that the product gets adopted to gets renewed, that entire life cycle.
it's almost like I'm hearing two different games that you personally need to play. One is overseeing each of these different product lines that may be at a different layer or level of maturity in that spectrum, right? From early product market fit to then being, fit for scale. But you're also overseeing the entire portfolio of many of these bets. And I almost imagine you overseeing a Central Park, chess game setup where there's, 50 different chess games happening and each at different layers of progression, and you have to oversee it all. And so, how do you think about that role that you play, where, on the one hand, you need to oversee this entire portfolio, but there's also this added layer of, you can't just become a holding company, right? And you have to have this unifying theme and kind of product coherence across the entire suite. And so you're playing, you're helping maybe each of your product leaders play each chess game, but you also have to play this meta chess game across
That's
it
right.
all.
I think you have to stitch the components together cohesively. And one of the things that one of my board members told me that was precious advice, and when I had just taken the job. Look, I knew nothing about networking when I took the job 7 months ago. I knew security because I had done that for 4 years, and I knew the WebEx business, but I knew nothing about the observability business. I knew nothing about the data business with Splunk, and we have a very broad portfolio. And he said to me, he pulled me aside after the board told me that, and our CEO told me that they're gonna give me this job. And they said, whatever you do, this gentleman told me, he's one of our great board members. He said, don't delegate the storytelling to too many people, because you'll play the telephone game and you'll fracture the story. So the end-to-end story you have to own and be the messenger for. And why is that important? It's not to stroke your own ego. It's so that if it's not, we have 1,000 products, Howie. There's no way anyone can be humanly, possibly dexterous at all of these products at all points in time. But if I don't have a simple enough story that shows the platform advantage from end to end that I can narrate, then the story is not clear enough. And so he's like, you have to be the custodian and the messenger of that story. And if you delegate that piece, because it's easier to delegate, do a keynote, get 5 product leaders to come in and go out and do each one of their pieces.
Five chapters written by different authors.
5 chapters written by different authors. It's not a book. It is now 5 different. It's 5 different
I
articles. You know,
right that
and
don't stick together.
that don't stitch together. And the thing is my job is to stitch things together. My job is not to build each one of the components. It's to stitch it together, but make sure that I'm influencing the building in a way that it can be stitched and that the stitching doesn't look like patchwork. It looks like one cohesive whole. And that requires having the right people in those jobs, because if you don't have the right teams that are going to make sure that they take your lead and you guys have an aligned value system, then you're going to go sideways pretty fast. And I'm very lucky because the the product leaders I have on my leadership team right now, the way I think about this is we are, you know, we're it's like a basketball game where the goal is to make sure that you're passing the ball, because if someone tries to score every goal by themselves to optimize for their stats, you might lose the game. So you have to keep passing the ball, but you have to trust that when you pass the ball, the other person is going to come through for you. And you have to believe that that trust is going to be there. Otherwise you'll be hesitant in passing the ball, or you will blame them when they don't score. So there has to be enough harmony in the team to make that happen. Otherwise, this thing doesn't work at scale.
Yeah. The storytelling metaphor is so powerful and beautiful because I think one, I like to think of it as, relevant because ultimately, we're all humans, right? Until it's AI selling to AI, it's about your ability to sell that story to customers. And, behind, customer deal is a human making a decision. Like, does this story make sense to me? Do I want to buy more of Cisco stuff instead of stitching together, this piece from this company and this piece from that company? Like, what's the story that, just makes sense and is 10x more compelling for me to buy into more of Cisco's suite as a customer. And I think it also matters from a market standpoint, right? Like, from an investor standpoint, when you follow the earnings calls and follow the narrative of Cisco, it's more than just the additive, kind of summation of all of the different products and, each unit's revenue. There has to be a greater coherence to all of it to believe that this company can compound at a better and faster rate than, any other company or a holding company equivalent, right? And so
That compounding value is the most important unlock that we were tasked to create, which is now starting to happen, and you're starting to see it. Because if I go purchase, if I go deliver value to a company that just seems like it's 10% better than someone else, over time, there's no way that I'm going to be able to bring this all together in a way that's compelling for the customer. There is a 100x differential that can be created when you start getting this breadth and pulling it all together. And I feel like that a lot of times that gets missed. And what you have to do is make sure that each one of the groups is thinking about the platform advantage. And the example I give is an Apple example. I think if I have an iPhone 15 and I'm going to the 16, or the 16 and I'm going to consider the 17, I'm not comparing the camera of the 16 with Google Pixel. I'm just figuring out whether or not I should wait for the upgrade to the 16 or wait until the 17 comes out. Why is that? Because I already have the Mac, I already have the iPad, I already have AirPods, I already have the Apple TV. And so there's a compounding effect that can happen, and the marginal cost of ingestion of a new technology goes down and approaches zero. And if you can lower the marginal cost of ingestion, and you can create more compounding effects so that when I buy a product from Cisco, it adds value to the products that I already own from Cisco. Now there's magic being created,
yeah.
you know.
It's such a great example. I mean, I don't know how many products Apple has, but it's a lot, right? And I personally own probably 50 distinct product SKUs from Apple at any given point in time. And yet there's a clear coherence to all of it, right? I don't feel like I have 50 different disparate products, each with their own manual and, kind of, uninteroperable system. It feels like I have one unified experience and one clear product story from Apple and the guarantee of what I get when I buy from Apple. So I love that analogy. And can definitely imagine a future where Cisco is like the Apple of enterprise in in the arenas that you play in.
We actually think about it that way. And one of the things that we think about is how are we going to make sure that we become a design first company, only second to Apple, where infrastructure gets to be massively simplified. And the reason that's important is you have to catch the megatrend. And right now, if you think about the megatrend, I've always learned, don't ever fight the mega trend. Use it as a
Mm,
tailwind. The
yeah,
mega trend right now is AI, and it's not just right now, it's going to be for the next decade. And you have to be wise enough to know the difference between a mega trend and a hype cycle. But in AI, we have to make sure that we drive the shift in the architecture that's needed for infrastructure and for security and at the application tier as a result of what Cisco can bring to the table. And that's actually where the magic starts to happen.
yeah. There's this, I believe, important trend happening, which is, software becomes more invisible, hardware becomes more invisible, right? And instead of like back in the day, I'm sure when you got your first computer, when I got mine, you felt the computer and all the different widgets and parts, and you had to connect the different peripherals and install all the software, and it was very clunky, right? You felt every piece of it as a discrete, chunk. And I think now we're in a world where more and more of our, products and services just feel seamless and integrated out of the box. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you see that playing into the future of both Cisco products and also just consumer product experiences in general.
So I'll give you both examples. At Cisco, we are very, very obsessed about, we build our own silicon. We build our own systems, which is the boxes and the hardware, and we build our own software on top of that. And then we build the applications on top of the management plane and software. And we also make sure that we try to get the data lake more correlated together so that, the data can be correlated in a way so that when I have an AI assistant that I ask for getting the system to do something, I can correlate the data between three different domains in ways that are very unique to Cisco that give you insight that otherwise would have taken hours and hours for companies to find. So what ends up happening is the 10xer for Cisco is the platform advantage because of the correlation of data, the delivery of insights that are very unique, with a unique kind of a combination, and making sure that we can do that over and over again in a repeated fashion. So platform advantage becomes the 10xer. Now, when you look at the consumer experience, um, I I actually think it's really interesting to start seeing how the, it used to be that only the consumer companies cared about user experience and no one else did. And I'm really encouraged at seeing what you folks are doing at Airtable. And, we're looking at you folks closely. We use you internally from time to time. And I think having a magical experience that just works, that you don't actually have too much cognitive overload for, is probably the difference between interesting technology and great technology, right? And it just solves a problem where the technology almost disappears. And all you have left is you and the problem you're solving and the output from the technology that allows you to solve that problem. And you've forgotten that there's this layer in the middle. And making people forget that there's a layer in the middle is the genius of building great experiences. And I feel like on the consumer side, we're starting to see this happen. Like, I have a lot of admiration for OpenAI because of what they've been able to do on creating canonical applications. I think OpenAI is as good of an application company as any of the application companies. I don't think of them as a model company. I think of them as an application company. I think Grok 3 get to that same state now. Like they've done a very good job on what they're trying to do with Grok 3 and how it's kind of just integrated into the experience. Anthropic's doing a very good job. So you're starting to see more and more of these model companies becoming application companies and delivering for the end user an experience that's completely devoid of friction. And I think that we have to always be. I always think like a product's only in two states at all points in time. It's either incomplete or obsolete, and I would rather be in the incomplete state than obsolete state. And the incompleteness is the constant dissatisfaction that a product manager has to have, saying, how do I make this just 1.27% better every day? Because 1.27% improvement daily gets you to 100x improvement in a year.
Yeah. Well, I think the corollary to incomplete is that there is still remaining vision to be delivered on, right? If you're complete, like I've already solved the vision, drop the mic, there's nothing more to do, which is actually not a good place to be in. But I think to your point on these AI products, to me, the really interesting thing is that it's not just about giving, everybody a shallow experience with models, right? The first wave of chat GPT experience for most people, or chat AI experiences, was just, people would come in and like do, kind of toy use cases, right? Like, hey, write me a poem, or like, it tickled, I think, the imagination of the public. But I think what we're now seeing are the capabilities to do more meaningful work with AI, right? And I think that leverage, I mean, to go back to the original Apple philosophy from Steve Jobs of computers being bicycles of the mind, bicycles give you leverage, right? You can go, 10x faster on a bicycle with less work. And so
That's
it's
right.
not just about ease and having a shallow and easy experience, but I think that that leverage of what you can accomplish. And I think that's a really, really exciting frontier for us to see. It's, certainly something that we're trying to deeply imbue into our product roadmap and philosophy. How do we give our customers leverage to achieve incredible value impact with minimal effort, right? And with fun
And
and delight.
what you've done that's really interesting is you've identified a white space where you're also noticing and driving an architectural shift, right? And I think it's very important when you're building a product that you try to spot the architectural shift
Yeah.
that is going to occur and figure out whether or not, one, you have the capacity, and two, the permission to drive the architecture shift for the market. And is there white space enough that that architecture shift can be driven? And what you've done with, for example, being the system of record and engagement for product managers is a great architectural shift, because right now there is no such thing. And I think there's going to be a level of um, consolidation that needs to happen in that space so that the product managers can actually find value in that. And I feel like those are important kind of dimensions to look at. The companies that do well are the ones that actually pick a mega trend, find the architectural shift where they have permission to play, where they have the capacity to actually do a good job because of a unique perspective they bring to the table that cannot be replicated just by throwing 1,000 engineers at the problem. They have a structural advantage, and that structural advantage then continues to keep compounding and amplifying.
Yeah. I mean, we could spend an entire hour going deep on this topic, but I think this idea of you need a system of record to be able to fully take advantage of AI in the context of real business workflows. It's sort of Palantir's ontology concept, and I think part of the reason why Palantir is doing so well, I mean, they're crushing it in terms of real deployments of AI value in the enterprise, because it's not just a free-form agent sitting on top of amorphous, sets of data. There's a structure and a systemization of the data sets that they're going after. And so I think that's one really, really important trend that we are, very much playing into. And then I think the idea of AI code gen is obviously powerful and it's becoming a thing. I personally believe that the future of app creation will become more and more no code centric, because you need a medium or kind of vocabulary for code gen that isn't literal code, that is only inspectable and manipulable by a developer, right? You need something else as an idiot. So we're super excited about that future. Hope to partner with many more great leaders and companies like you and like Cisco. But with that, maybe some closing thoughts. One, what's your one favorite read that you would recommend to other product leaders?
For product leaders, hard thing about hard things.
Great.
Outside
Um,
of Innovator's Dilemma and Innovator's Solution, because I think that's a timeless book. You need to understand the theory of disruption that actually continues to hold true no matter what happens. And as large companies get smarter, like most people think, oh, large companies get stupid. It's not that large companies are stupid. They've just been a victim of their success, and they have to constantly be in founder mode. Like one of the things I have as a core principle is we have to operate like the world's largest startup, which means we have to operate at speed with scale, right? Um, and we need to make sure that so on that front, I think hard thing about hard things, Ben Horowitz does a great job in that book on just explaining how you can manage your psychology
mm,
and really think about the entirety of the end-to-end business. And then, of course, Innovator's Dilemma and Innovator's Solution, Clay Christensen, I think that's the Bible of tech. I personally feel like rather than reading 50 books in a year, sometimes it makes more sense to read that one book 50 times because you get new insights from it over and over again. And so that's something that I would recommend that you really internalize before you go to a third book. Like go to Innovator's Dilemma, Innovator's Solution, and go to Hard Thing About Hard Things. They're all older books, they're not newer books, but I think they will give you plenty of insight that's still relevant for today's day and age.
It's a great cue for myself. I read those books earlier in my founding career, but I'm sure I would get a much richer and different interpretation of them now, applied both to my newest set of experiences, but also the place the world is in now. And then final question. You clearly are a person who appreciates great products, great product culture. What are the companies or even specific products that you most admire and love?
Well, right now, like I said, I think it's hard to not admire OpenAI. It's hard to not admire Anthropic. Anthropic was really interesting because they came in not being the market leader and have established themselves as a clear one of the major players in the market. We just invested in them quite substantially. I think it's very cool to see. And on the on the consumer side, I would say that from an auto company, I felt like in the earlier days, Tesla just nailed it.
Yeah.
The full vertical integration of the stack. There's a lot to learn from that kind of that entire thing. And then it's hard to be critical of Apple and what they've been able to do 14, 15, 16 versions. Actually, it's more like 30 versions out because they actually had two versions for a while every year. Um, and there's still a cachet with some of these things. Now, I think they've you can continue to see the level of hunger that Apple shows, and I'm fortunate enough to work with some of them behind the scenes where there's a lot of benefit that Apple accretes by just having their steadfastness and kind of unwavering focus on building the few things that they do really, really well and not getting too distracted. And I do feel that's an area that you have to continue to keep in mind. I tend to admire companies with durability rather than just flashes in the pan that come in, because I think being able to have a single product that does well is one thing. Being able to have a family of products that you can actually continue to sustain market relevance for multiple decades is something that we should all learn from. And any company that's done that deserves admiration, even if along the way they might have made some tactical mistakes that you want to overlook because you want to actually learn from the larger things that they've done that have actually worked really well for them for 20, 30, 40 years.
And that could be a whole separate follow-up episode. So maybe we'll queue that up for the future. But the different types of multi-product strategies. I mean, some companies like ServiceNow doing a single platform, but then tooled into different solutions to attack different lines of business
ServiceNow has
versus.
done a great job, by the way. Amit's a good friend of mine, and I will tell you, ServiceNow is a company that we should all admire quite a bit because they have one platform and then they've just kept building these applications. And what they've done remarkably well is those applications get to scale in a very compressed amount of time.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
I mean, I like to think, a little tongue in cheek, that ServiceNow has created basically the same amount of market cap as SpaceX in about the same amount of time. They were actually founded only 2 years apart. SpaceX actually a little before ServiceNow. But tongue in cheek, it's just the incredible amount of economic and market value they've created with that approach, selling workflow software. And then, just maybe as a way to end cap our conversation, I think the product example you gave, OpenAI, Apple, Tesla. I get the sense you just feel the level of hunger. First of all, you talked about that at the very beginning, being one of the clear differentiators for, on an individual level, how you break out in a career. I feel like you get that taste of hunger. You feel the hunger for improvement and making great products in all of those product experiences, even to this date, as well as a sense of a coherent narrative, right? Like when you look at the Tesla lineup, when you look at the Apple lineup, when you look at the OpenAI products, there is a sense of narrative coherence to it. So I think three great examples that really pull together a lot of the principles that you've talked about. And
Howie, why the clarity of the story really matters? Because clarity of the story is a direct reflection of clarity of thought. If the company did not have a clarity of purpose and of thought, there would be no way that they could construct a clarity of story. And so, without clarity of thought, you can't build amazing products. And so you have to be able to distill the substance from the noise. And that, I think, is why it's so important to be able to. I pay a lot of attention to the way that the company tells the story, because if that story is not told well, that means that they haven't really thought through the value proposition well enough.
Yeah. On that note, this was an awesome conversation. Really, really enjoyed it, and really appreciate your time.